So I just want to react to this idea. Um, this is 2014 White House uh, press briefing here. But there's something coming up here that kind of made me think of the 2016 election in the United States. Um, One of the reporters is asking when when the president talks about doing various things, is he not broadcasting his strategy to Russia or to ISIS? And he specifically says to Russia. Um, And the reaction from Pretty Boy Josh here was, um, he's not, because um, they understand that their opponents um, uh, already are going to analyze the situation, and it's a very astute response. I'm not sure how deeply Josh knows of what he says here, um, and that's like I don't know what I don't know the depth of his knowledge, but in fact, when you have um, these military groups, and I mean, you might you might think on first thought that this doesn't apply to ISIS, but my understanding is that ISIS has demonstrated the exact opposite. ISIS tends to learn very quickly. It seems to be very sophisticated, actually. This is something that I'm learning myself. Its ability to evolve to circumstances on the field is much beyond what you would expect from a group of, religious extremists in the middle of a desert, indicating that they're not what they say, or they're not what we're told, right? Um, it seems like the sophistication of their um, abilities to evolve suggests that there's some serious military training underlying what they're doing, right? They're just not just a ragtag group of crazies, but but there's some serious training going on with the people that you see uh, on the battlefield there. From where? Well, it's obvious, but there's no need to get into that right now. Um, what's more interesting to me is in the context of the Russians, because this is the Cold War context, right? Again, I don't think we can divorce ISIS from this as strongly, but let's talk about what we know, right? In fact, both the United States and the Russian military, both the American military and the Russian military, have huge operations designed to predict what their opponents do. And the systems that they have are designed to um, predict any possible outcome, right? So if you were to flip the situation over, um, I know that one of the companies that, or one of the institutions that does this a lot is the Rand Corporation in the United States. Um, and what they do is they look at the situation and they predict every possible outcome, and they do it all using this sort of game theory analysis, so that um, everything that their opponents do is predictable. And the Russians have equivalent systems. They might have taken a bit of a funding hit in the 90s, but the 90s were a long time ago now. Um, and we can expect that there's not really much we could do, or there's not much the Americans could do to flag their intentions that would be beyond the Russians' ability to predict what's occurring. You can be almost certain that whatever the Russians do, we have a contingency plan for. And you can be almost certain that whatever we do, the Russians have a contingency plan for. So this idea that you're like giving away your strategy is just, you hear this from Trump. He says this all the time. And it's just remarkably ignorant as to how these systems actually operate. But more to the point is that it's really scary. Because if you understand a little bit about the dynamics in the Cold War, it was the mutual predictability and assumptions of rationality that kind of prevented us from bombing each other over and over and over again. Both of our militaries, and I say our when we talk about the Russians, I mean NATO, right? Okay, both the NATO military and the Warsaw Pact, I guess, militaries, Soviet militaries, time and time again, had to fall back to the assumption of mutual rationality. We're not going to push the button because our opponents are rational. And if what we're seeing is happening, it must be because it's an error, or maybe we've misunderstood. And had it not been for that predictability and these assumptions of predictability, we probably would not be here right now. None of us. Because the world would have been obliterated under a barrage of bombs. So I know it sounds really, you know, there's a lot of machismo underlying this idea that, if you want to win the war, and you can't be giving off your strategy because then they'll know what you're going to do. It's a mindset that is so ignorant of the reality of the situation that it's hard to understand how you're even hearing it. But the quick answer is the president giving away his strategy? Well, I hope so. Because we don't want them not knowing what we're doing. That would be really dangerous.